The time is exactly 9:35. We're now going to be talking with attorney, and that, of course, is Chantelle Gladwin-Wood. She's also an attorney and partner and Notary and Conveyancer at Schindlers Attorneys, to talk to us about a very important matter, and that is how property owners will be affected by the increase in rates and taxes 2023. A very good morning to you, Chantelle. Thank you for being with us, and welcome.
Thank you, and good morning to your listeners.
Okay, so, you just think it's safe to go out, and then you're hit by some other new form of tax. And if you're not alert, things just kind of go over your head, and before you know it, you're out of pocket once again. This time around, we're talking about a warning that has been put out by Alta, and they are saying that the rates and taxes for homeowners in Johannesburg there's a possibility that it's going to be increased. And they also are warning us that we need to check that our property valuations are reasonable so that we don't overpay on property rates. How does a homeowner determine that it is in fact reasonable? Chantelle?
The 2023 General Valuation Roll, which is the one that everyone's talking about right now, and which is open for objection until the 31st of March, is available to every homeowner at the city's offices and on their website. And they're also supposed to send you a notice. And the notice, we call it a Section 49 notice, and it tells you what your proposed valuation is for the next general roll, which will start on the 1st of July and will endure or last for at least 4 years, but more likely 5 or 6 years. So to find out what your proposed value is, you check on the notice or on the website or at the city's offices. In order to know whether it's reasonable or not, you need to have information about the market value in your area. Now, this is not something that the average layperson normally just has lying around, and we usually advise our clients to either seek the expert assistance of sworn valuers if it's a high value property or a business property. But if it's a normal residential property, you can also seek the assistance of estate agents in your area, which can give you an idea of what the property could sell for.
What worries me, Chantelle, is the city determines the values of your property on a market-related willing seller to willing buyer value. If you're wanting to buy my property, even though my property is only worth maybe 2 million rands, but because you want to desperately be in that area for whatever reason, you're willing to pay me 1 million or 2 more. How does that impact then on neighboring properties as well? And if you have paid such a high price for the property, are you able to get back your price in the future if you're wanting to sell it? Is there ever a situation where you are told by the estate agent or a prospective buyer that you actually overpaid for your property?
Okay, that's a couple of different questions. So I think I'll start with the first one, which is what happens when you purchase a property for more than what it would normally be worth. So this would not be a normal arm's length transaction, which is what determines market value. So let's just say, for instance, you're buying it from your mom and you wanted to give her some extra money because she doesn't have a pension, and so you included it in the purchase price of the property, something like that, right? That's not an arm's length sale, and that shouldn't be utilized by the municipal valuer as one of the comparative sales that they will use when they look at what the market value is generally in a particular area. So any of those very exceptional transactions shouldn't actually be taken into account because they're outliers. In terms of your second question, if you do end up paying too much for a property, do you have any recourse? I'm not sure. That's a difficult question to answer, because if you purchased it on the open market and there was an agent involved and you were willing to pay that price for whatever the reason is, you mentioned perhaps you'd really like to be, for example, in the feeder area of a certain school. then it means that that is the market value of their property because there are people willing to pay their price for it. So I think it depends on the context of the sale itself.
Okay, I've got a question here from a listener who's asking, how does this impact on properties in trust? Does it have no impact? Because my understanding of, if you've bought a property in the trust of, your children or your grandchildren, that property is not, you don't ever sell it. Am I correct? Am I misunderstanding the concept here? The children, whomever the property has been entrusted to, can't sell the property, or is there a time frame put in place that if the child, when he or she reaches whatever age, there is a loophole, he or she can then sell the property? Am I understanding the listener's question correctly?
I think in terms of the trust, it depends on the terms of the trust deed itself. When the trust is created, the founder or founders put special provisions in which determine the life of the trust and when the assets within the trust can be distributed to the beneficiaries. So you'd have to look at the trust deed there. But in terms of the question of what is the impact of this general valuation roll, every piece of property in Joburg should be on the roll, and that would include property owned by trusts, companies, PCs, even by other types of juristic persons, which are organizations in law. So, for example, like churches or universities. So all of these properties are on the roll, and they all get a value, and they also get given a categorization. And a categorization is just a fancy word for what kind of property are you, a residential, or a business, or an industrial. And those two things then determine how much rates you pay every month. So this role definitely does impact on trust property, because even property that is held in trust will still be getting an invoice every month for rates and taxes. And if it is overvalued, then the trustees of the trust must make an objection to make sure that they don't end up overpaying.
Makes lots of sense. Thank you for responding to that question. What happens if, for some reason, you feel that your property has been over or undervalued as far as the city council is concerned? And I'm also wondering about people who are happy for their property to be overvalued, because the thinking is that at some future stage, if I do want to sell the property, it's going to bring me extra income. Is that the right way of looking at the situation, or are you shortchanging yourself?
It's funny, there's a very funny meme doing the rounds on Facebook, and it's got 4 corners of a postcard. And on it, there are 4 different pictures of how different people view your property. And the picture of how the bank views your property is as an enormous mansion, and how the municipality views your property, it's a little hovel, a little shack. And that is because people do utilize the value of their property for different purposes. So primarily raise money on like a bond, for example, and there you do want your property to be as high as possible so that you've got equity in whatever business transaction you're dealing with. But for the municipal purposes, you don't want your property to be overstated, because then you are going to pay additional rates and taxes. So you can't have your cake and eat it. If you state that your municipal value is R1 million, then when you tell the bank it's R2 million, someone's probably going to ask questions, and you may get into some trouble there, or have your loan declined to be accused of fraud or something like that.
Okay. We're kind of almost in a catch-22 situation here, because we want to know that our properties are, really worth a lot. It gives us that sense of security that my property is worth 2, 3, 4 million rands, and if I sell it, that's what I can hope to get. So even when you make out your will, you're kind of ensuring that your heirs will get quite a tidy sum once you've moved, once you've passed away. But having said that, it comes at a price, does it not? Because you could be shortchanging them it may come to a point where the property needs to be sold, but the value is not in fact as high as you had stated. And in the interim, you're paying the higher rates and taxes, leaving you out of pocket.
So when we talk about what the municipality values the property for versus what you think the property value is versus what the market thinks the property is, you may have three very different numbers in mind. That's why when you're doing estate planning, for example, with your wills and looking at your children and trusts and things like that, it really is a good idea to get independent advice from experts who can advise you to get the right valuations, because exactly as you say, if you accidentally overvalue it or undervalue it even for a certain purpose, you could end up with additional taxation or other types of consequences down the line that you hadn't intended.
Okay, another question from the person who asked the question about the trust, the property in trust. Let's just read this off. If you transfer a property in your name into a trust for your children, is it viewed as a regular sale of a house and you pay the transfer duties as you would for a house that you would buy on the open market? Or is it a very simple process and you just pay a small fee? To transfer a house, let me just understand what they're trying to say here. If I have a home and I want to put it into a trust for my children, into a trust fund, just to change the ownership, what are the costs involved there? I think that's putting it very simply.
So it depends on how you structure the transaction. In most cases, it will be a sale from you, let's say mom and dad, into the trust. And then the trust needs to pay you the money for the value of the house, because you can't give it to the trust for free, because then it will be a donation, and then donations tax will be payable. So normally what happens is that the trust pays you that on loan account, meaning that it will pay you back over time and then pay the complete value of the sale over time. Alternatively, you reduce the value of the loan account every year according to the taxation regulations, but that's a bit complicated. But it's normally a straight up sale, and you do pay transfer duty, which is the tax, and you also pay normal transfer fees for the transfer of the house, which is based on the value of the house. So it's based on the market value, which is what you can buy and sell it for in the open market, and it can be quite an expensive exercise. There are other ways to do it if you have business entities and other sorts of transactions that might be able to accommodate that kind of transfer, but normally it could be a straight up sale.
Okay, so it's not as simple as our caller is hoping that it would be. So it's not just a matter of me wanting to transfer one of my properties into a trust fund for one of my children, and then try and get out of paying all of those transfer duties, etc. You can't get away with that, can you? Because that's how I understand the question.
No, that's how I understand it too. And there are different kinds of transactions which are, for example, transfer duty free. But it's not clear from the fact that you've given me whether those might be applicable to the situation. We have to do proper estate planning there and investigate all sorts of things.
Ah, okay. All right, that's all the listener has been asking. So unless they do post another question, I will put it to you. So here we're sitting with this issue regarding the rates and taxes for homeowners in Johannesburg. If I'm not happy with the current valuation of my business, my business property or my home property, how do I go objecting, and can I hope for a favorable outcome?
So the city has forms that are available on its website, which you download and you complete in order to lodge your objection. So you can also do it online when the website is working, but otherwise you can download them and then fill the information and attach your valuation evidence, which is going to be whatever documentation you have that supports what you are saying the value and the category should be. You sign it and you deliver it to the city before the deadline on the 31st, and then they will give you a objection number. Now, that unique objection number is kind of like your ticket for having lodged your objection. And the average waiting time is somewhere around a year to 18 months. but the city has said that they're going to try and expedite these outcomes. So you wait until you receive an outcome from the city, and it's expect to be well received. That depends on what valuation evidence you attach. If you attach no valuation evidence, chances are your objection is going to be disregarded because you have not given the city anything to change its mind. It's already done a valuation. It has a bunch of evidence on file. You need to give it enough evidence to change its mind. Otherwise, your chances of being successful are quite low.
What sort of evidence are we talking about here, Chantelle? I mean, you are the, the expert in these matters, and people like myself who don't understand all these legal issues around property and home ownership and rates and taxes, etc. How do I, what sort of evidence do I need to attach? So I'm in my house for the past 10 years, for example. The house has been valued at R1,000,000. They now want to put it up to 2 million rands. What evidence do I support, my query or my objection with?
If the property is of a value of less, I would probably say ballpark 3 or 4 million rand, it's likely that you're going to spend more money paying for a professional valuer to come out and value the property. The costs there are roughly 4,500, 5,500 rand per property. So when you're looking at properties in that range, it's normally not financially feasible to pay someone to do a sworn valuation for you. However, that is the best evidence that you could possibly get. So we would always recommend that in a high value objection, or even for business. Generally, business properties tend to be worth more than residential properties. If you are not able to afford to get a sworn valuation, or perhaps you can't find a valuer because they're all very busy or something like that, then you can ask estate agents in your area, and we would advise you to ask more than one, so at least 2 or even 3, so that you can utilize an average, which is obtained from their evidence. Also, the more values you have, the stronger your evidence is. You can also use bank valuations, so where valuators have gone out and done valuations of your house for your bond or your building bond or whatever the case is. And then you can use valuations which are drawn from systems called mass appraisal systems. So these are computer systems that search information that's on the net, and they have algorithms and they pop out a value for your property. But these are really not accurate in many cases. They can be, but a lot of the time they're not. So one must be very cautious because often they don't take into account the specific nature of the property, the unique characteristics of the property, and so they can be rather inaccurate. Some municipalities don't use them at all, or they don't regard them as being suitable evidence at all.
And I'm also thinking that over time, when people buy new property to move into, there are lots of upgrades that are undertaken, maybe installing of swimming pools, upgrading the kitchen, retiling, etc., etc. And that all has to be taken into account. But that also, of course, pushes up your rates and is going to push up your rates and taxes. Am I correct?
100% correct. And the roll is only published in every municipality, the general roll, every 4 to 6 years. So you only see that big jump every 4 to 6 years when they revalue your property. In between, you only get a little increase, which is not based on your value at all. It's based on the annual municipal tariffs, which is just basically the price list that goes up every year.
Okay, my final question. So you for some reason can't afford it, or just feel that you don't want to pay the increase in the rates and taxes and you undervalue your property. Are you doing yourself a disservice? Because at some stage, if you do want to sell your house, the municipal value is going to indicate the understated value that you had actually furnished them to the city council. Am I right?
In a perfect world where every purchaser on the market knew what you had stated your house value as in your objection, yes, that would make you look a bit dishonest. And it might make your purchasers worry that you've inflated the value of the house. But we
Mm,
live in an imperfect world, and normally that information is not available to purchasers. So,
right.
or it is available to them, but they don't understand the consequences of that information. So, unfortunately, as well, in Johannesburg in particular, the information on the property roll is not trusted by the public very much. So, a lot of people might look at the value and go, oh, well, I know it's wildly wrong, so I'm not going to trust it. So usually it doesn't actually have an impact on the value of when you sell your house. Normally your estate agent will tell you, this is what we think you can sell it for, and that will be completely independent of what is on the municipal roll.
Okay, so, and finally, I did say finally with the previous question, but finally, if you don't lodge your complaint timeously, you've missed the window of opportunity, have you not?
You have, and it is hypothetically possible in certain limited circumstances that you will be given another opportunity to object over the next couple of years, but it is not guaranteed that that will be the case. So it's a relatively complex thing for us lawyers to go and fight when people have missed their original objection window. It can be done, but it's not easy and it takes a long time.
And costly, I should imagine. Maybe not costly, but
Yes.
it's going to cost you a pretty penny. Anything at all, anything else that I've not touched on, Chantelle, that you believe is important for our viewers and listeners to understand regarding our property values, regarding, the rates and taxes for our properties?
I think it's really important for listeners to understand that your value is one component of what causes your rates bill every month. The other component is the category. And if your property is wrongly categorized, so let's say it's a residential property, but they've put it on the road as business, your property rates are going to be 2.6 to 6 times more expensive than they should be. So it's really important that you check that the categorization of your property is correct and object as well. So there are a couple of funny categorization sort of fights, if I can call it that, going on in Joburg at the moment. And the big one is about sectional title properties, residential properties, which happen to be built on an earth which has zoning of business. What happens is Joburg regards these as business properties and charges business rates to these properties, even though they are sectional title in use. And there's a whole big court case pending about that. So that's just for your listeners to be aware of, but it's very important. Please check your category as well as your value.
Okay. The issue, as you speak, more and more questions pop into my head, so please do indulge me. I promise you it's just
Not
one or
a
two
problem.
more questions.
Really
Um,
not a problem.
we know the situation we caught up in here in South Africa regarding the rolling blackouts and the issue around the water, the impact of water as well. So going off the grid and installing your own borehole obviously is a big plus for a property owner. But how does that impact on the rates and taxes? Is that going to also increase the value and then you're going to end up paying more?
Hypothetically, yes, because it's an additional reason that somebody would choose to buy your property over the property next door, which doesn't have a borehole. They would factor that into their calculation. They'd be willing to pay more for your property. So it would increase the market value.
Okay. So yeah, like they've always said, Chantal, there are two things that we can never and will never avoid in life, and that is death and
Yes,
taxes.
and
And we
absolutely.
and we're caught up in that little circle right now. We're just not in a very good place right now, South. I don't want to sound like a doomer and a gloomer, but we're not in a very great place at the moment, are we, as South Africans? What with load shedding, what with rising taxes, what with unemployment, and more. Chantal, your thoughts? Where before I let you go?
Yes, it is feeling a bit doomy and gloomy at the moment, in particular because today is the last year of the 2023 financial year. And so tax is payable today by certain provisional taxpayers as well. So pretty much the whole country is nail biting today. But maybe after the first tomorrow, people will feel better. new financial year.
Wow. Let's pray. Chantelle Gladwin-Wood, it was truly lovely talking with you this morning. Thank you indeed for your legal guidance regarding property owners being affected by the increase in rates and taxes. Very highly valued. Thank you once again, and God bless.
Pleasure. All the best.
It is exactly 9:59 a.m. News and Views. Actually, as we were speaking, the clock struck exactly 10 o'clock. That means it's time for me to wrap up. Thank you indeed for your time. I do hope you've enjoyed my company and all of the interviews this morning as much as I've enjoyed being here. Till tomorrow morning at the same time as always, please take care on the roads. Don't forget, please look at your rates and taxes, property valuation rates and taxes, so that you can lodge a complaint if need be, and you don't find yourself out of pocket. Once all of that has been determined. A big shout out to our producer, and that's you, Nasrin Naidu, and Kolani behind the controls. Till tomorrow, take care on the roads. Assalamu alaikum and Khudafiz from me, Julie Ali.